Well, thank you so much for being here, and I'm just wanting to ask you a little bit, Maddie, about the work that you do and some of the work that you've presented here at the conference.
I presented yesterday about, it's kind of, I just took a lot of my content from my chapter for Queer and Indigenous in Australia, the book that Dino Hodges putting together for release in November. I didn't take all of it completely. I wrote some original material as well.
So people will still need to read this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No. You'll have to read the chapter as well to get the full experience. Yeah. I guess I was writing a lot about, because Andrew specifically sort of asked us to write about intersectionality and to make that a big part of the conference and a part of our presentation. So I wanted to talk a bit about coalition politics in queerness, in queer contexts, and Indigenous contexts, and feminist contexts, and some of the other contexts that I've sort of experienced and been a part of.
Yeah, I mean, intersectionality is one of those very tricky terms, and it was really interesting to hear yesterday that quite a few speakers talked about how difficult it was, and you were talking about, you know, that politics of alignment in a really interesting way, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of those trending kind of buzzwords, you know, that I've sort of been thinking about the way that it's become a buzzword in the last couple of years, where people sort of, it's really cool to be, you know, to identify yourself as an intersectional feminist. I think especially for third wave, fourth wave, kind of into the future feminists, often see that as like a pull away from like what they see as more conservative feminism, and a way of identifying yourself with it, almost a subculture. So I just think I'm really interested in the complications of that.
So you think people are using it as a strategy to say, I'm not a racist, but...
Yeah, no, I do. I think it's a strategy to say I'm not one of those racist feminists, or I'm not one of those, you know, transphobic feminists, for example, which is, you know, the usefulness of sort of one of those subcultural identifiers, you know, when it comes to sort of saying, you know, people use it in the same way, I'm a radical feminist, I'm a queer feminist, you know, that kind of, or I imagine they do, but yeah.
You're an accomplished researcher, but you're actually just also starting your PhD.
I'm not really an accomplished
researcher. Sure you are.
Yeah.
But was it interesting then, in light of, you know, the fact that you're about to embark on this, you know, next big study process, to have all of these people come in and be talking about, you know, queerness, particularly in an international context?
Yeah, I think it was so important to be in Indigenous research space. It's always so important to be in Indigenous research spaces for me, because I often feel like, you know, everyone gets this imposter syndrome in the academy, and you think that I'm not supposed to be here, what am I doing, like, you know, black fellas aren't supposed to study like this, you know, but you know, it's almost like I'm lucky enough to have lots of older, you know, sort of forerunner generations of Aboriginal folks who come through the academy, and they're less like, it's important for you to know this is your space, and being in research spaces that are just full of Indigenous people, and then coming into here, which is also full of Indigenous queer people and all these like older folks, is just like really important for me, and for probably lots of other young black fellas as well, who come in to study and think like, oh, am I supposed to be here, and having everyone else there being like, yes you are, like, you know.
Yeah. Well, and as an older one, it's also really good to hear the experiences of the younger generation.
Yeah, and I
think you do then have that kind of you know, that reflection on how people are feeling now.
I think it's so important, because I think sometimes the tradition in like feminist stuff, from what I see, is that there's this unspoken competition as well between the older and the younger generation. Like from when I come from Melbourne Uni, and you know, there's kind of definitely a sense that if you're one of the younger generations of like of women going into like feminist studies or women's studies, that you're like, you know, the older ones are like, you know, this is my movement, what are you doing with it, you know what I mean, and like you're, you know, you're upstarts or something, and like to have a supportive environment is so important. Instead it's like really furthers, I guess, the projects that we're all supposed to be actually focusing on, you know.
So you talked about the book that you're doing with Dino. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, it's a collection of essays, oral histories, and I guess autobiographies. People are writing like such a diverse range of material for it, but Dino's kind of putting it all together and editing into a publication, like a book, an actual physical book, which I think is going to be the first of its kind in Australia, especially the first of its kind written by actual Indigenous people, and so many different people as well. So that's, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a pretty interesting project. I'm interested to see what comes of it, and what it can then sort of foster in the future. I think it's a starting point more than anything, you know?
As I think this you know, symposium has been.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks so much,
Thanks.
Maddie. I appreciate it.
Thank you.